Hello, everybody, and welcome to another special episode of Undefined. I am here with Parker Millsap. How are you, Parker?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, you've had a lot of cool things happen this year. You just released an album called Wilderness Within You. Would you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Let's see. The record came out in May.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the sonically the record's kind of all over the place. There's folky stuff, there's like kind of synthy industrial stuff, and a lot of stuff in between. Uh, and the a lot of the songs are about, I guess, like the modern sense of isolation and our disconnection from the natural systems of the earth, I guess, if I'm trying to sum it all up in a couple sentences.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I definitely kind of noticed that earthy nature influence. And I think, it's really cool to see your sonic transformation throughout your past couple albums to now, because I felt like you had a little bit of like a little bluesy, folk, rocky stuff. And I feel like you're kind of, in pun intended, going more down to earth. How is it like as a musician going through these album cycles and, throughout these album cycles, where do you get your inspiration in that point of time in your life?
Yeah, I'm always finding new things to be inspired by. Wilderness Within You is my sixth record. And I made my first record. I'm 30 now. I made my first record when I was like 19. So I've done a
Mm-hmm.
lot of changing,
Mm-hmm.
um, personally and in like my listening tastes and stuff. So uh, I've learned that I'm a pretty impressionable person. Like I absorb influences and they come out in whatever I do. And at first I think I was maybe, I don't know, confused or thought it was stealing or something. But now I just try to see it as an asset, like being able to bring a new perspective to all the different things that I love.
Oh, for sure. And I think it perfectly kind of fits the vibe of this show because I do not go by any genres. I just kind of play whatever tickles my fancy. And I think that's the best way to enjoy music is, once you kind of stop looking for like labels and genres and things, I think that really allows you to grow as a listener, artist, creative. I think it's great.
Yeah, for me, music is culture. So the more I discover new kinds of music, the more I'm aware of other cultures and uh yeah, inspired by the overwhelming diversity of
Yeah.
our planet and all the different types of music that there are. And a lot of the music that I love really started as a fusion of two or three different genres, coming together
Hmm.
and making something new. So, and especially now with, modern music consumption, we can get music from anywhere, now. You don't have to go
Yeah.
like digging through record crates to find, a cool, I don't know, African record or some,
Hmm.
Eastern European record or something, it's
Hmm.
just there on the internet.
Yeah. You bring up records. I actually had a question because I know that you are a big music guy, big record collector. Now, let's say you're in a random city, you're on tour, and you have like 20 minutes to go record shopping. Like, which section are you going to first?
I'm going to the world music section. Usually, there's like a giant pop rock section, maybe a decent classical section, and then like a section that's like blues, folk, world,
Hmm.
reggae, really localized styles. And that's where I'm always headed. One, because generally the records aren't super expensive, especially like compilations and stuff. They're just not super sought after by collectors.
Hmm.
So I mean, they're out there. Don't get me wrong; they're expensive, small
Yeah.
press records out there. But I can usually find something that's unlike anything I've heard before, and for a reasonable price.
And that's the best kind of stuff too, to get like the compilations, the stuff where you don't really know what's on it, and then you just get to go home and listen to it. It's so
Yeah, yeah.
fun.
I particularly the past 6 months or so, I've been buying lots of they'll do these compilations where things are grouped by like country or something like that. So you get a bunch of various styles from this one country, but there's like the people in the highlands that play the harp, and then there's the people that live closer to the water that play more hand drums and stuff. But getting all of that on one record, and then being able to, yeah, do research and dive into the various subgenres. Yeah, that's been what I'm into lately.
Oh, that's so fun. And I kind of wanted to talk more about that and how it relates into the new record because there's definitely a lot of sounds, a lot of layers to this album. I wanted to know kind of what were you listening to at the time, but with all of these music that you're listening to, you're taking in, what did you want to incorporate in this record specifically?
Yeah, I say a lot of like acoustic African music. I'm going to mispronounce these names, but there's a Mbira player. It's like a harp instrument.
Mhm.
That his name is, I think it's Balalake Sissoko. And there's this performance of him and a cellist and like a 12 string guitar player somewhere on the internet. And I've watched that like dozens and dozens of times while making this record. And I think it kind of shows up on songs like Running on Time. There's like this kind of finger picking thing, and it's not a straight like 1-2 song. It has a bar of four and then a bar of three and then a bar of
Mhm.
four and a bar of three. And that's something that comes up in like some of the Eastern European music that I've been into, these like kind of crooked rhythms. But it's also, in like old fiddle tunes and stuff, do the same kind of turning around the beat. So to me, that one, I was able to like fit a bunch of the different things that I'm into in there kind of subtly. And it's also got like a drum machine kind of going through the back of it that I've been listening to a lot of dance music recently too. It's like I
Mhm.
don't really know how to make that music.
Mhm.
It's pretty removed from like my musical roots, but I really love it. So I've been trying to find ways that I can, yeah, sneak little elements of all the things I love into songs that are mine.
That is so awesome. And it's good that you mentioned running on time because I love it. So I remember when I first heard that song, like all the layers that you described, like this is awesome. And I just like it just stuck in my head, stuck with me for a long time. I think it's definitely one of the standout tracks on the record. I think it's great. Have a collaboration, The Wilderness Within You, the title track with Julian Welch. I wanted to know how was it like recording with her?
It was awesome. It's like a 3-hour dream sequence.
Oh wow.
I I wrote the song and took it into the producer and played it for him, and he like helped me come up with like one of the last line. He was like, I think we need one more line, so we kind of like tossed it back and forth to get the last line figured out. And then we were like, well, it works solo acoustic, but how else could we dress this up without messing it up? And we're like, well, some harmonies would be really nice. And Ryan, producer, was like, well, who do you want to sing on it? And I was like, the first name, I was like, well, probably Gillian Welch. And then so we made a list of like 10 people just in case we couldn't get a hold of anybody. But luckily I know people who know Gil. So I
Mhm.
reached out to them and was like, hey, can you maybe possibly do me a favor and see if Gil would be interested in doing this? And she said, yeah. And then a couple weeks later, we sent her the demo. And a couple weeks later, she came in, and we probably did like 7 or 8 takes just live, us two, and picked the best one. It was real easy.
That's so awesome. It's so cool that you were able to record it with her live in the studio because I know sometimes, especially with um, how fast the music industry now, and especially because of how everything was a little bit isolated due to COVID, a lot of collaboration just kind of happened sending files to each other. So the fact that you're able to get her in the studio and have that experience, that's so awesome.
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty great. I live in Nashville, and she also lives in Nashville, and we both happened to be off the road at the time, so it made sense. Yeah, yeah, I love Gil.
Awesome. So talking about Nashville, I know you grew up in Oklahoma, and I wanted to know if you mind kind of giving us a little bit of your musical journey. I know we talked a little bit about it, kind of what music you listen to, but how did you kind of get in? I know you grew up around the church, you played on a lot of music there, but I love talking to my guests about like kind of what drew them to become a musician, what were they listening to when they were growing up, and kind of how it shaped you into who you are now, because I think that's really cool to talk about.
Yeah. So yeah, I grew up going to church a lot, in like a Pentecostal church. So lots of
Mhm.
loud singing and dancing and a big band and all that. And so that was where I got my first taste of like the power of music, you know. So at least twice a week, if and most of the time 3 times a week, I was going to church and seeing live music. And then when I was like 7, my parents got me a guitar. And then after a few years of me trying to like figure it out by myself, they're like, "We're gonna get you some lessons. We're tired of hearing you not know how to play that." um, so they got me some lessons, and then like as soon as I could operate a capo and knew how to identify chords by looking at people's hands, there was
Mhm.
another guitarist at church, and he was like, "Just put the capo where I do, and watch my hands, and here we go." So when I was like, I was probably 10 or 11 when I started playing guitar in church. And so that kept up my whole, until I graduated high school, basically. And then I was in band starting in 6th grade. I played snare drum from 6th grade till
Oh my
graduating high
gosh.
school. So, what'd you play? I see it in your
Oh
face.
no, I have a band
Did you play?
brother. That's why. Yeah, my brother,
Oh,
he's in the Ole Miss Pride of the South
oh,
marching
nice.
band. And I never grew up in that band way, but like I've kind of experienced that secondhand through
Yeah.
him and watching him, and like he had to come this summer. He's like, "Oh, I need to come home for the week because I need to go volunteer at the high school's band camp." So it's a whole I've been,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
indoctrinated in the
So
band kid culture.
yeah, so that was me. I was a drumline kid for yeah, that. But for a long time I just didn't think to tell people about that because it doesn't seem
Hmm.
to have anything to do with my music, but actually it really does. I was introduced to so many musical concepts and
Hmm.
just music that I would never have been introduced to otherwise. And like going back to Running on Time, that the odd time signature thing that's in that song. I was first introduced to that, in like 8th grade or something, playing a concert band piece, and I loved it then. And only now have figured out a way to incorporate that. So yeah, so then band, and then I started writing songs. When I was probably 14 or 15, had a little like garage band, and we played, the Relay for Life in the little town I grew up in and all that. And then after high school, I interned at a recording studio for a few months, which is really cool in Northern California. Got to just see how a pro recording studio operates day to day and be on the other side of the glass and
Hmm.
wrap cables and make coffee.
Yeah.
Um, but then after that, I moved back to Oklahoma and just started doing house concerts, coffee houses, restaurants, wherever I could play. And then gradually got involved with this thing called Folk Alliance, where I met David Macias of 30 Tigers, and was able to get hooked up with that. And I've just been trying to crank it out since then.
That's so awesome. You've gone through so many kind of different musical journeys that I wanted to ask kind of follow-up question to that. So I know you were in all of these environments, church and band, and was there a point in time where when did you think that you kind of discovered, I guess, your own music taste? Because I know when you're growing up, when you're a kid, teenager, you're listening to all the stuff around you. Was there a point in
Mm-hmm.
that journey where you're like, oh, this is like you're going and you're finding albums yourself, or you're learning about things in school and you get kind of gravitated towards that and you're kind of building
Mm-hmm.
up your own musical palette?
Yeah, it happened pretty early because um, my parents listened to like interesting music. We didn't listen to a lot of top 40 radio or like even top 40 country radio, which was like the big deal. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everybody heard the hits everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that wasn't like the CDs that we had. We had a lot of like gospel CDs and also a lot of like singer songwriter stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Lyle Lovett, Robert Earl Keen,
Yeah.
like Texas singer songwriters.
Mm-hmm.
and also a decent amount of like more modern blues. So like Keb Mo and Taj Mahal and Ry Cooder. Like there's a Ry Cooder record called Boomer Story that um, I remember the first time I listened to it. I was going fishing with my dad, and he put it in. I was just like 5 years old, and just like, what is this? This is the coolest thing I've ever heard, and I still
Mm-hmm.
basically feel that way. Um, but I asked my dad like, "What is that instrument?" He's like, "Oh, that's a guitar," and that's a couple years after hearing that record, I got a guitar after asking and asking, because I heard that Raikuda record. So I was, I kind of had divergent taste from the get go from my friends and stuff. But also like when I got into junior high, I got really into, like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Eric Clapton because I played
Mm-hmm.
blues guitar and got really into the Red Hot Chili Peppers because
Mm-hmm.
the bandmates that I was in a band with at the time were super into the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So, discovered some like harder stuff, but also like the really melodic songs that they have also had a big influence on me of just like it's pretty, but it's still guitar heavy and rock.
Mm-hmm. That's so
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
so yeah, I've just been, into music on the fringes since pretty early.
I relate to that 100%. Like my parents, we listened to the radio, but they also had like CDs, and so I was the kind, like I brought my Beatles number one album to first grade and would look at the booklet while the teacher was talking to me. So
Yeah.
I've kind of like a similar situation of, being influenced by kind of those CDs from family and friends. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And I also saw that you performed at the Basement East show of the Jean Prine birthday shows that were
Yeah. A few
happening. I
nights
want to hear
ago.
about that.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
was a
that
few
seemed
nights ago.
awesome. How was that?
Um, it was incredible. A lot of great singers and writers there. It was packed. I don't think I've ever seen the Basement East so full, which is great. I just did one song, "Big Old Goofy World," which
Mhm.
was, they said, "What song do you want to sing?" And that was the first one I said, and I got it. So,
That's awesome.
yeah, it was great. Yeah, yeah. There's like I think 20 plus artists there, and it was with like John Prine's band, which was really
Hmm.
incredible. Getting to share the stage with them. They know exactly how all those songs go.
That is so cool that you were able to play it with a band too. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Was the lineup not announced until the day of? Because I
I
just
don't
kept
know if
seeing like,
it ever was announced.
yeah, I kept
I think
seeing
it
like
was
all
just like,
these.
come see who's here.
Yeah, I saw all these videos. I'm like, oh my gosh! I was like, the more I scrolled, I was like, all these people, all these great
Yeah.
musicians, and it took place over multiple venues, right? So it was the Basement East, it was the Ryman, and then someplace else. I'm blanking out.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
It
so
was.
awesome.
Yeah, super cool.
That's
I was
awesome.
honored to be asked to sing.
That's great. And we want to talk a little bit more about tour. So I know you're going on a little bit of a fall tour and you're making a stop in Oxford at Proud Larry's. And I think it's November 8th. What should we expect in this current tour? What does your set list kind of look like these days?
It's pretty spread out through all my records. I try to do, at least one song from every record. But I think the set's probably going to lean mostly on the newest record and the very last day for the most part on this tour. But there'll be something for everybody. And it's going to be guitar, bass, drums, and fiddle. So yeah,
That's
I'm sure
exciting.
people who know my music are probably familiar with Dan with the big red beard. He's coming on this
Yes.
tour.
Oh my gosh. I was hoping because I was watching to prepare, I was watching like the Austin City Limits videos and
Yeah,
you playing with him. I'm like, oh, the fiddle is so good.
yeah. Dan rocks. He and his wife have a farm south of Nashville, and over pandemic it like has really taken off. So he's been working his butt off down there at the farm lately. I hope he's excited to come on tour.
Oh, that's gonna be great. I love live fiddle. I just it's
Yeah.
recently like it's become one of my favorite instruments to kind of listen to live.
It's I mean, violin is so versatile, you know. You can do pretty much any genre. You can play it by itself. It sounds great. Yeah,
Yeah, just when you we're able like to be able to mix it with a band, I just think it sounds really cool too.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
I,
Dan's great at it. He comes up with great parts. You know, some songs he does more of like a classical part thing, and
mhm.
other songs he just rips.
Yes. And I'm going to kind of give my viewers some homework, my listeners. If you have not checked it out, look up the live performance of Hades, please, for Parker Millsap. If you want to hear that fiddle, there's some really good fiddle in there. I think the Austin City Limits performance of that should be up on YouTube. It's wonderful. So we kind of talk about this album. I've heard, you're really based and nature focused, and you've really gotten into that kind of connecting with the earth lately. As somebody who's on the road, who's kind of away from home a lot, like as a touring musician, what was the kind of moment for you when you really learned like and kind of felt connected with doing things like I see you do a lot of gardening, things like that? Like when did those causes and really become prevalent in your life?
You know, I grew up in a small town, kind of like a small town in Oklahoma, so it was rural, and I was
Mhm.
surrounded by a lot of open space. And I got to spend a decent amount of time. We didn't really go like hiking and stuff as a family, but like I went fishing a lot. My uncle had some land that we would go camping on from time to time. Uh, and when I moved to Nashville, I really quickly became aware of how many more people there are, in a city than the place where I grew up. Like growing up, I thought I was a suburbanite, but then I moved to Nashville and I realized, like, oh no, I'm from the country. um, so I think I've just always been aware of and appreciative of open space. But also, as I've learned more and more just from like reading books, listening to podcasts, I could,
Mhm.
name like 50 different sources for people to go read. But
Mhm.
also just people I follow online and stuff. Learning more about ecology and like the earth systems and how they're all related to one another, from like, from a fly to a mountain, like to a thundercloud. Like all of it really is connected in these very more direct ways than I realized. And pandemic, I had a chance to slow down for the first time in a long time.
Mhm.
And those first few weeks of pandemic, when just nobody was like going outside, and like we were seeing like birds and animals that we would never see in our neighborhood, it just like it was kind of a wake up to me, like, oh, I think we're doing a lot of things wrong, and like a lot of our systems are ignorant of the fact that we live within a much larger uh, system, also known as the ecosystem, that we are responsible to. um, so yeah, I don't have any solutions to these
Mhm.
to these feelings, but that's what the record's about, I think.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's great that we were able to talk about that. I definitely wanted to learn more about that. And then I also like to talk to my guests about, you mentioned books. What kind of books kind of inspired this kind of cycle of your music? Do you want to mention any of them?
Yeah, there's a book called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's a scientist who is also indigenous, so she has kind of both. She calls seeing with two eyes. I think she
Mm-hmm.
can see things from an indigenous perspective or from like a Western scientific perspective, and the whole book just talks a lot about the difference in the two cultures and the two thought systems, but also ways that we can try to bring those together and use some of our, I guess, modern intelligence, but marry that to the older wisdom. So that was a big influence on me. And there's the first song on the record is called Greetings and Thanks, and it's based on the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address, which is basically like an ancient prayer that is still said today when the Haudenosaunee tribes get together. They start with an acknowledgement, basically, of everything's humanity. So I found some translations of that and tried to make it rhyme and be respectful. Yeah, that was a big influence. Another book, I think the author's last name is Sheldrake. It's called Entangled Life, just about like fungus and lichen and bacteria and how these things kind of challenge our notions of individuality and separation. So those are two, nonfiction books. I haven't been reading any fiction.
That's also, I love it. I love to learn like about, it like we were talking about, it goes great with the album. I love learning about creativity and what sparks inspiration. I just think
Yeah.
that's so interesting to learn about.
Yeah. Oh, another one that I'll mention is, and this one's like kind of advanced, and I'll say I did not read this. I listened to it on audiobook, and I think if I had tried to read it, I might not have gotten through it because it's a little more academic than I am. But it's called The Dawn of Everything, and it's basically a book about a bunch of archaeological finds of the past 10 plus years that challenge, yeah, a lot of our notions about like how old humans are and what our path has been, and what society, like how old society is and the limitations of it. There are a lot of assumptions that were made in like the 18 and 1900s that are starting to not hold up as we dig up really 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 old human sites. But I just think it's fascinating. I love thinking about the ancient world.
Yeah, that sounds so fascinating. Well, that was great. Thank you so much, Parker, for coming on the show.